Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. I'm Mike Hanselman. I'll be your host today. I have a couple guns up here. It's a pretty cool lineup. So first, I want to talk about the Glock 19. This is a Gen 5 that has a custom Cerakote job on it. The actual color for that was, what was it called, Pat?
Black cherry.
Black cherry. So pretty cool finish right there. A lot of times I hear women say that they don't like firearms and it comes down to the color. Most of the time when you go to a gun dealer, all the colors of all the guns there are always black, and it's just not really that intriguing to them. So a word of advice for the gentlemen out there: if you're going to buy the missus something, get her an awesome gun, something that has the quality like a Glock. Get a custom Cerakote job done to it, and now you're good to go. So that's our G19. Now right next to that, right over here, what you guys are going to see is basically an upgraded Glock. Now this is a completely separate manufacturer. That is what we call a Shadow Systems. That particular model, which matches up perfectly with the G19, is what we call an MR920. So Shadow Systems used to actually modify Glocks, and they're like, you know what, we can actually build a Glock, but to its true perfection as Glock claims. So Shadow Systems came out with their own version. Basically identical as far as the firearm's going to go, but with upgrades on it. It has better stippling on it. It has a direct mount optic for it. And if you're running a common optic, you don't need the adapter plate like you would need with an MOS Glock. You can also see the fluted barrel up here. I'll actually bring it in focus for you guys a little closer. It does have a fluted barrel. It does have different sights. These are going to glow in the dark here. This is the Elite version. They also have a combat version. So the combat version has a solid steel. The Elite version does have your slide cut out, so there's less mass coming backwards during that reciprocation of the slide. As far as your controls on here, one thing that will differ from the Gen 5 Glock versus Shadow Systems is this is not ambidextrous for a slide release. All right, not a big deal, because I'm going to say 95% of shooters are right-handed, so it's not the end of the world. But that is one of the big differences in my personal opinion. One thing that I do like about this gun over just a standard Glock, and I think anyone is going to tell you this, the trigger. This is going to come with like a real nice drop-in trigger, basically, versus you spending an additional $150, $300 and throwing it in your Glock. This comes with all the upgrades that Glock wished they had, in my opinion. Now, don't get me wrong. I am not against Glock. I think Glock, for a civilian firearm, most common firearm out there, end of world situation, Glock is probably the way to go, simply because they used to have the most sales. Now the G19 is probably one of the most universally carried pistol out there, so that's why we have it up on the table. Let's put a magazine down here just to hold that paper down. All right, above our, that's not working either, so we're going to throw a med kit up here as well. Above our G19, so right up here, we do have a factory Glock G17. Now, the biggest difference, the G17 is going to have about a ½ inch longer frame and a ½ inch longer barrel. It's basically what your duty pistol for police is going to be. So, in my personal opinion, you should always carry the largest firearm that you can conceal on your person. If that means you can fit a submachine gun underneath your jacket, you're going to be a hell of a lot more accurate with that than you are with a small pocket pistol. So carry the largest thing you can. I personally carry something like that G17 right there. So it's not that you can't conceal it. You might just have to revisit your wardrobe and decide if you want to try to hide a firearm that is longer. Now, ultimately, the G17 and that G19 are basically going to be the same gun. In fact, the G17 magazines will still fit inside your G19, but not the other way around. And the reason you can't switch it is because of the smaller frame for that G19. The magazine doesn't have enough height to actually reach inside the magazine well of that G17, but your 17 mags would fit inside that 19. So, while we're talking about magazines real fast, the magazines for your 19 will also fit in the Shadow System. Shadow System simply runs a P mag, which is also comparable to a Glock mag. So you could take your magazines from the Shadow Systems MR920 and run them in your G19 as well, which makes all of this a pretty universal firearm so far. And again, end of world, that's what I want, the most universal firearm out there. All right. Now, comparable to that G17, you can see the gun to the right up there. That's actually what you call a Zev OZ9. So just like Shadow Systems was the upgraded version of that G19, the OZ9 is the upgraded version of a G17. They also have a compact version, which is going to be comparable to a G19 or that MR920. But ultimately, the takeaway, in my personal opinion, is Zev is going to run you about 3 times the cost of a Glock. Most people do not need that firearm. You're never going to benefit from having all the upgrades that's on that firearm. But if you are someone who just likes guns and you don't mind spending high dollars on a gun, it's not a Glock, all right? Although you can still run a G17 magazine in it, this firearm is worlds different. So let's talk about the Zev for a minute, and then we'll compare it directly to that G17 since they are the same length. I'll bring the Zev over first. When we talk about the texturing, you can see in the grip, this has way more texturing than what any factory Glock's going to have. Your serrations are cut way deeper. Just like the Shadow Systems, it is cut on your slide and a large cut on the top of it, so there's even less mass coming backwards during the cycling of the firearm. You can see that the slide is already cut to have an optic mount directly, so there's no use of a base plate or anything on there. As far as the components on this go, I'm going to just flip this around. Everything's very textured, which is something I like as far as your magazine release. You do have a much larger, I believe they call this their Pro magazine well. It does come factory on this particular one, but again, the price point of this is like $1,800 versus a Glock of $600. So you are paying 3 times the amount. Now, the trigger for this. I personally think this is one of the best triggers for a factory firearm. However, this is also a firearm that you could just pick up from the store, load up a magazine, and take it to a competition once you sight it in your red dot, and you don't have to do any other upgrades to it. So you do have the higher price point. However, let's talk about why the price is what it is, all right? As far as your grip goes, you can see that there is a little dimple right here. It basically locks in that middle finger for that solid grip. You do have a performance barrel on it. This is going to be dimpled more or less like a golf ball, and that's just going to help keep the barrel nice and cool while you're cycling. As far as your slide cuts in here, again, that's going to reduce all of that mass. And while we're talking about that reduction of mass, we have to make note, this firearm, without any of the optics or without that flashlight, just factory, it's going to weigh about 20% more than what a factory Glock is going to weigh. And the reason it does that is they actually have a steel insert. So this is going to be a very modular firearm, which is pretty cool if you're into switching parts out and doing things with the gun itself. But that's one of the reasons I really wanted this. When you talk about putting 6 rounds on a target in a second, your recoil reduction is going to be a huge factor if you're going to make it or if you're not going to. Utilizing something like that steel insert so the weight is well balanced and you have all that weight right up in the front holding your gun down with less mass of your slide coming backwards, this gun is just very flat shooting. Now I'm going to set this one down and we're just going to pick up our Glock, right? And let's talk about the Glock. Again, it just doesn't have the same weight that the Zev OZ9 had. As far as features or reliability go though, guys, this is a $600 gun that I would trust with my life without doing a single upgrade to it. In fact, most of the time when I go to get a Glock, a factory Glock like this, the only thing that we're actually going to be doing is sending it off so I can mount my optic directly to it. You can see there's no base plate on here. We don't want anything like that. We want it as low as possible so you can co-witness through your iron sights, and that's it. And there's a flashlight. Really, guys, if you're just looking for a gun that you could trust and use as that everyday carry, I would totally go with like a G17, a G19, a G45. Any of those are going to be great options. But if you are going to get something for your wife and you want her to truly enjoy shooting, change the colors. This thing is sweet. It looks awesome. It's not black, even though that's the color it originally came with. It just has a real thin layer of that Cerakote paint on here. A lot of times people ask how the wear is going to be when it comes in and out of a holster. Guys, it's a firearm. It's going to get worn. I hope that your gun doesn't stay beautiful. If it does, you need to take it to the range or just get rid of it because you don't deserve that firearm, all right? So shoot the crap out of it. If you like your Shadow Systems, this gun, oddly enough, even though I believe it might weigh less than what a Glock does, I haven't actually put it on a scale or looked at those numbers, so I'm not positive, but it seems like a very light firearm, but because of those slide cuts that are in it, this thing just cycles perfectly. One thing that's not on here, but it very easily could be, is this does come with a magazine well, and not as intense as what that Zev has, but it does have a flared magazine well so that you can, you know, get all 3 fingers totally locked in. It does have the undercut here, so you get all 3 fingers up here anyway. Totally up to you if you guys want to mount that when you get yours or not. But all 4 of these guns are very universal and very similar with slight differences, and that's why we see the difference of price between firearms, is basically the upgrades that they come with factory. Now, could you buy a Glock 17 or 19 and build it just like that MR or that Zev OZ9? Absolutely. But here in New York State, basically when I go to buy a Glock, I have to then send out my firearm so that I can get it stippled. Then I need to send it out to someone else, so it's going to get milled. Then I need to send it out so I can also get more aggressive slide serrations cut into it. And all of a sudden, it's been 6 months, I still don't have my gun back, and it's just not something I want to deal with. So generally speaking, if I want all the upgrades on the firearm, I'm going to pick up that MR920. If you want the G17, but you were really, you know, fancied into that Shadow Systems, they do have a DR920, which is identical to that G17, so you could get either version there. If you really want to spend a lot of money, feel free to jump into the Zev. Again, if you want the compact version like the G19, they do have that as well. So really figure out what your goal is when you go out to the range and what type of gun you actually want. If you want all those upgrades, you could do it yourself and build it completely different, or you could buy a factory one and just know reliability is not going to change because it's done at the factory, not by you working in your basement. Either method though, I've done them both ways, guys, and they simply work. So find something that works for you. Last thing I got for you guys though, the comment section. I need to know what you guys are carrying. If you have a G19, if you have that 17, if you've ever shot a Shadow Systems, whether it was the MR920, the DR920, or one of their new XR920s, go ahead and leave that down below. And if you've ever heard of Zev or shot a Zev before, let the people know what your thoughts are about the firearms and how they differ. I appreciate you guys tuning in and watching this. There's going to be some more videos coming, so as always, leave comments. Appreciate it. Take care. Shoot safe.